Recently, our nation was shocked by the horrific tragedy that occurred in Newtown, Connecticut. In response, there has been a renewed commitment to creating school communities that are safe and ensuring that our students receive all they need to learn and grow. As a member of the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, I was proud to join Congresswoman Jackie Speier, Sheriff Greg Munks, the County Office of Education, and the County Office of Behavioral Health and Recovery Services in gathering local leaders and service providers for a summit entitled Beyond Newtown: How to Ensure Safe Schools and Communities. In one room, we brought together school district officials, police chiefs, mayors, city council members, public health and mental health service professionals. And at the end of the conference, 3 task forces were created to take a close look at San Mateo County's efforts to prevent tragedies in our communities. The 3 task forces address standardization of protocols, mental health services, and information sharing between agencies. What you're about to see is a panel discussion on standard procedures moderated by San Mateo County Sheriff Greg Munks. The discussion centers around making sure the many cities and agencies that serve our children are trained to work together with standardized protocols when responding to an escalating incident or a troubled student. Thank you for watching.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for participating in this very important summit. I want to thank Congresswoman Jackie Speier, Supervisor Adrienne Tissier, and Superintendent Ann Campbell for their leadership and commitment, which made today possible. And Jackie, on a different note, keep up the good fight in Washington. We have universal background checks here in California. There's no reason why we shouldn't have those throughout the country. So thank you for your efforts on that. I'd also like to thank Oracle for this wonderful venue. Oracle has been a big partner for public safety here in San Mateo County, and we certainly appreciate this very nice venue. We live in one of the safest counties in California, yet even here we are not immune from the ever-present threat of violence that plagues our nation. And the worst kind of violence is that which is brought upon our children and young people. Whether in our schools, on our streets, or in their own homes, violence or the threat of violence interferes with a child's ability to learn and grow into a productive member of our community. Unfortunately, our criminal justice system is full of individuals who were either victims of or witnesses to violence at a young age. That is why we're here today. As Jackie said, we're here today to change the world, so let's get started. We are fortunate to have 3 outstanding public sector leaders here with us today that have each dealt with youth violence in their communities, and we hope to learn from their experiences. I'm going to ask a question, and each of the 3 panelists will answer that question. I'm going to start with Chief Susan Manheimer from the City of San Mateo. And that question is, what have we learned from past incidents of school violence, both at the local and national levels, that inform local current practices to ensure school and community safety? Chief?
Thank you, Sheriff. Can everyone hear me, or should I pull this closer? Good? Okay, thank you. So thank you first, Catherine. We had you out here in 2000 and whatever, and right after this hit the National Register, and you've just really gone on from there to continue to educate us. And Sheriff, I think this is a wonderful question because we in San Mateo County, I should qualify it by saying I am the president of the San Mateo County Police Chiefs and Sheriffs Association this year, and having been sort of around the block in San Mateo County for about 12 years now, I was actually the president back when we started working on our active shooter response protocol. We were one of the first in the state. You'll recall right after the deadly school tragedies down in San Diego County, 2 fairly close together, we recognized that we needed to get that national protocol and get a local protocol. One of the things at the time we didn't realize is clearly Columbine was the game changer for us. We all recognized that police could no longer respond to an active shooter situation, sit outside, contain, control, and sort of figure out a game plan while kids are getting shot or maimed or injured inside. And so we did change. And then again in 2001, 2002, we started our active shooter response protocol. What I think at that time we didn't quite recognize, and again, we've been very proactive in this county, both on the educators, mental health, the law enforcement. We work so well as a county, which is why this is an exciting seminar. But I think we failed to recognize that it wasn't just the police response. Every time a police responds to a school incident, we will have everyone in the county, and then even some of the other counties from mutual aid. And that means many different agencies all responding. So we did get our act together, and we all really coordinated our county-wide response. We practiced, we trained to it, we take over numerous schools after hours, and we really worked on that. But then we left it to local chiefs to work with their local superintendents, and I'm sure my esteemed colleague, superintendent of the San Mateo Union High School District, will tell you that having 5 local chiefs or six jurisdictions becomes problematic, because we didn't really recognize yet the importance of having that unified protocol countywide through education. All of our first responders, our partners in public safety, fire, EMS, et cetera, that we all needed to put that together. And I think we'll talk about that as one of our next steps. But what was missing, I think, on the other side of that was that clearly we had tremendous cutbacks at the school. If the one message I took most clearly from Catherine, both today and maybe 8 years ago, is the identification and assessment of that threat. What we've had are some cutbacks that have seen us take probation officers off our campus. Probation officers weren't really there just for their probationers. They were that voice of reason. School counselors, maybe 1 to 600, 1 to 1,000. Who's really watching the store of safety and security for our students? We like to think we're doing it. School resource officers, there were many grants for them earlier. They have all been cut back. So that entity is not really on campus. And the school safety advocates, you know, there's all these great models, but we need to stand them up and be resourceful as to how we leverage and get those resources going. So I think there's a lot that we have here to discuss today. One of the things that I can tell you is seeing just in San Mateo, the city of San Mateo alone, we had our Hillsdale High School bomb incident. We had at the San Mateo Foster City School District, we had an abduction of a student there. And we've had just recently a social media threat, just general threat to the campus at Aragon. And each of these, whether it's an active shooter or a threat, really needs sort of the same scalable components that all of the various entities that are here today, everyone from adults who are in the schools, PTOs, the student counselors, the administration, the parents, the students, law enforcement, if we can really start putting together and understand each other's roles and really look for where we identify and execute the risk assessments, then I think we'll really be well off. We are ahead of many others in this county, but we really need to move forward. School violence happens in big towns and small towns. The recent incidents that we've seen were not surprising to those who knew them. The most important element, identifying that risk. What do we have in our county that we can play off of? When we have a threat identified, it's either a mental health issue, and frankly, mental health, while strapped, usually looks at how do we treat that individual. Really not more the overall connect the dots assessment of what threat that individual may play in the future within our community, whether our schools, our workplaces, our malls, our theaters. For the prosecution side, has there been a crime occurring? Prosecutors have enough to do to bring good cases to court. They really aren't focused on what is the potential of the risk. Where do we stand up a risk and threat assessment? I would submit there are several places, and we can talk about that later. And then finally, because I think I haven't been keeping time, but you're going to kind of notify me?
Wrap up.
Okay, I'm wrapping up. In summary, we have learned that coordinated and concentrated efforts from prevention all the way through can really help to identify, to avert, and then ultimately to have an incredibly coordinated response. But we must connect the dots and look at those individuals and those threats.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Now we'll hear from Scott Lawrence, Superintendent of the San Mateo Unified School District, Union High School District.
Thank you. Just to give you a little context, we have 9 programs, schools, various different small programs scattered across 9 different sites with 6 cities and a corresponding number of public agencies that we have to interact with. And as the Chief was saying, is that typically we have a general kind of pattern of how things work, but each site and each city have slightly different ways of doing things. Now, unfortunately, I've been here for 4 years. And in the past 4 years, we've had what we would consider to be 7 extremely significant events scattered across the various different sites. Each of them were slightly different, but they were important enough that we felt that a fairly extreme reaction was needed. Everything from shutting down a site, evacuating the site. And so it's been an interesting 4 years, and I really appreciate this opportunity to come up and share, because I think we're just a piece of a bigger puzzle. So what we've learned over the past 4 years is that we need to do 4 things. The first thing we need to do is we need to prepare. Now, by preparing or preventing, we are fortunate that we're fairly well resourced, and we have guidance counselors, we have psychologists, but we also have the ability to work with YMCA, with our school safety advocates, to offer that outside of the school district kind of confidentiality to allow our students to go and to work with people that are qualified to make mental health assessments. And we don't share a lot of the information, but there are thousands of interventions that happen across our schools on a yearly basis. And we're talking about suicide prevention and bullying and family problems and things like that. My concern, and hopefully I'm representing the superintendents of the county, is that we are well resourced. There are other schools in the county that don't have anywhere near the amount of resources we have, and that's a big concern. We also are really concerned about having that, having that qualified adult on campus in some way, shape, or form. We have so many contacts with the students. We have coaches, we have counselors, we have those quirky art teachers and math teachers, and they're the people that we hope our students get comfortable enough that they can go and make contact and share the information. Now, one of the things that we've been fortunate in, when we've had these 7 or 8 incidents, we usually find out what happens through the students. And a lot of the times we're actually able to prevent things from happening because they come to us before there is a serious event. Now, the second part of it is preparation. It is kind of two-phased. You have to understand that with as many agencies as we work with, as big as our schools are, communication is a huge need of the school, but that means all sorts of things. That means, what do you do when the power goes off? What do you do when the cell phone towers go down? What happens when you can't access a computer? How do you communicate with the various different police agencies that are coming in? So we're talking about walkie-talkies, we're talking about generators, we're talking about all sorts of things just to prepare for incidents that might possibly and hopefully never occur. We also have to make sure that we have mental health folks that are available to us when we do have big concerns. The San Bruno explosion was a big key for us, because what we found out is that we're a regional district. We had a student who's lost their lives at Mills. We had 50 students that live in San Bruno that go to Burlingame High School. We have a number of staff that actually live in San Bruno that were scattered across our district. So after incidents, it's really important for us to have mental health support all around our entire district. The third thing is practice. It's so hard to think about this, but remember 20 years ago, we would practice for the earthquake drills once a year? And then about 15 years ago, we started, okay, we're going to do twice a year fire drills. Well, since Columbine, it's been monthly drills and training of the staff, but as the chief was saying, that has changed. It's evolved as far as how they do things. And so it's really important for us to spend a lot of time training our staff on how to understand what to do in an emergency. And then you also have to understand is that typically what happens in an emergency is all the practice, you practice the wrong things because it doesn't go along a certain plan. And finally, the last thing is that we need partners. It is so nice to have someone like Chief Mannheimer to be able to come walk onto campus in an emergency, understand what their thought process, what our thought process is, what we need, what they need, and be able to work together to have that sort of communication. It's also important for us to be able to tap their knowledge. We're not trained in crisis prevention or crisis management. That's not something that you do when you grow up as a history teacher or a coach. And so we need to be able to work well with the folks that are the supporting agencies. We also need to have partners in the mental health area. It is so important for us to be able to have a good, strong relationship with county mental health, with the YMCA, but there are other resources out there that we need to tap, and I think this is a good first step and for us to get an idea of what's available and what we can do to make this better. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Now we'll hear from Barry Nagel, the city manager of the city of South San Francisco. Barry?
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here this morning. Unfortunately, in South San Francisco, we have not had a major incident on campus. However, in 2010, there were 5 City. The first one took place on March 23rd, followed by a second homicide on May 4th. There have been no suspects apprehended or identified in either of these cases, which are believed to be gang-related. On December 22nd, 2010, at approximately 7:15 p.m., shots were fired at 7 Norteño gang members while walking along the 200 block of 8th Lane. 6 of the 7 members were hit, 3 of the victims fatally wounded. The victims were members of the Cypress Park Locos and the Norteño Street gang. Investigators quickly determined that the shootings may be related to a shooting that occurred in Daly City a few days earlier on December 18th. During this shooting, 4 Sereno gang members were shot at in front of a liquor store. 3 of the 4 gang members were hit and injured. However, all the victims survived their injuries. Investigators from South San Francisco Police Department, the Daly City Police Department, the San Mateo County Gang Intelligence Unit, Narcotics Task Force, and Vehicle Theft Task Force immediately got together and developed a suspect that was later determined to be involved in both shootings. All these agencies worked together and were able to seize the vehicle used in both shootings. However, the suspect eluded investigators and managed to escape the country. In response to these shootings, the city addressed the violence related to these issues through intervention, prevention, and suppression measures. First, the City Council approved the hiring of 4 police officers. This action allowed 1 officer to be reassigned to the existing school liaison program. Another officer was assigned to the San Mateo County Gang Intelligence Unit. In addition, a neighborhood response team, NRT, comprised of 1 police sergeant and 3 police officers was created. The focus of the NRT is to address gang activity through a variety of methods, including outreach contacts, which include playing soccer and basketball with local youth, visiting after-school programs, and engaging community members in open dialogue while on foot patrols. Since February 2011, the NRT has made a total of 595 arrests. 315 of those were gang-related, conducted 4,167 field inspections. Of those, 1,399 were gang-related. They made 4,659 outreach contacts in the community. The team also seized 27 firearms, which is rather alarming. Second, at that time, Mayor Kevin Mullin and Councilman Pedro Gonzalez, with the support of the full council, formed a community coalition for safe neighborhoods and secured the services of the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center, PCRC. The role of PCRC consists of 3 major components. First, coordinating, facilitating a strategic planning process. Second, supporting existing efforts to partner with the South San Francisco Police Department. And third, staffing ongoing support of the Community Coalition for Safe Neighborhoods. The coalition brought together the city, school districts, service providers, and residents to work toward solutions to growing violence. Regular meetings have been conducted and a variety of programs were put in place directed at elementary and middle school students. The summer outreach program at Parkway Middle School has had hundreds of students participate in basketball, soccer, martial arts, and many other positive activities. A junior Chinese program for youth ages 5 to 12 years also was implemented. In addition to these programs, the coalition promoted and participated in Walk for Peace, National Night Out, and a variety of community dialogues to engage the public. Now, circling back to the triple homicide, on May 17, 2011, South San Francisco Daly City Police Department met with Homeland Security Investigations HSI gang unit on this matter. Detectives from Daly City that worked previously with HSI on another investigation. HSI, along with South San Francisco and Daly City Police Department, presented the case to the United States Attorney's Office. At this point, the investigation was agreed to be investigated by the Attorney's Office and became what was known as Operation Red Tiding. I am pleased to say that on May 3rd, 2012, after a year of investigation, HSI, along with numerous other agencies, served 13 search warrants and arrested 20 persons that were indicted in this criminal conspiracy to commit murder, including the arrest of the 4 suspects in the triple homicide on December 22nd, 2010. Thus, Operations Red Tidings came to a close. What we learned from these tragedies is that to bring the suspects to justice took hundreds of staff hours, several law enforcement agencies at the federal and local level working together, and financial support from the city to maintain the staffing needed to eradicate the entire gang. We also learned the importance of maintaining our school liaison officers. They provide real-time information concerning school culture, student behavior, and gang activity. The officers work closely with school staff and students. School staff members provide information to the officers on situations at the schools that may carry over into the outlying community, for example, gang activity. Liaison officers also inform school personnel of growing trends or violence on the street that may show itself on their campuses. And finally, we have seen the very positive result in the city of implementing the neighborhood response team. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Second question is, what barriers continue to exist that most impact our ability to create safer schools and communities? Chief?
Thank you. I think first and foremost, everyone in this room should be very proud and reassured that we have put this at the top of our sights for a very long time in this county. That being said, this is a continuing, evolving situation. Every time we get more information, we need to continue to work with our best providers. I think one of the things I'd really like to see is that we get, and we've already started working on this, a unified protocols and practices throughout the county. Every single county education, private and public, should be on the same page as every responding public safety official, as well as those in mental health and support services that are on our campuses. That's really first and foremost. Secondly, I think that we still have tremendous issues with record sharing and information sharing. The feeder schools, I understand we want a clean slate for a student, but frankly, if we're not communicating what comes from a feeder school as an issue into what happens in a high school or a CSM campus or others, we are really at a loss and we are doing a disservice. We need to get our hands around privacy versus and individual rights versus the right to know and the right to identify and do a risk assessment. The third barrier, I think, is that exact same thing about, do we really harden our schools? What levels of safety on our campuses do we want? Is that uniformed officers? Is it school safety advocates? Is that different, where different resources are involved? Should we be looking at these new COPS DOJ grants that have school resource officers, for instance? I would love to see a task force that is dedicated and devoted cross-departmentally, cross-discipline to ensure that we're covering all of those issues for our kids, our youth, our most precious asset. And then finally, I think that we are lacking the ability to discuss across fields those individuals that hit different areas of concern that are different indicators for different folks. If you look at a youth risk assessment matrix, part of it rests with the school, part of it rests with home, part of it rests with the beat officer who knows what they're doing late at night, part of it rests with their pediatrician or their mental health provider. So until we can put all of these connect dots together and be aware of and really get on top of the bullying that seems to contribute in marginalizing these youth, either causing them to be suspects or victims in the future, we really will not have, we can have the best reactive protocols in the world, but what are we doing on the side of the intervention and prevention? It's really critical, and we have the way to do it here.
Thank you, Chief. Scott?
Thank you. And I couldn't agree more with Chief Manheimer about the prevention part of this. This is for us is probably the most critical aspect, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to react. That means that we didn't do as well as we probably could have up front. Barriers, the first one probably for us is time. To learn all these things, to do the training of our staff, to get our coaches trained in what to look for with students that may have needs. It takes time to do that sort of stuff, and so we need to be able to have that time with our staff to do the training, and then the cross-training with the various different agencies. Again, that takes a lot of time, and it's something that we just need to make a top priority. The second part of it is there is definitely a resource allocation issue. We need just some hardware type stuff, emergency trailers and communication gear and generators and things like that. But we also need to restore the guidance counselors. We need to have more mental health folks on our campuses on a daily basis so that we can prevent this type of thing from happening. And we also need to work very closely. We're meeting on Friday to talk about trying to get additional resource officers on our campus, because we find that in all of the various different districts or schools that we have, when we have a dedicated officer, which everyone seems to be trying to get us to have, it really works. And finally, it's the size and the number of institutions. Again, I couldn't agree more with the common protocols. I hate going into 9 different sites and teaching 9 different protocols and then having a teacher transfer and go, well, wait a second, what's wrong with this picture? Why don't we do it this way? So that communication, and also the communication, we do it now through relationships. We talk to the beat officers, we talk to the mental health folks, but there is no strategic way to identify students that are at risk and then to be able to come together as a united community to be able to deal with their issues. So I would think that we probably are going to look at the very similar types of issues.
Thank you, Scott. Barry?
One of the barriers that we find, and I think it's pretty similar in many situations, is that when an incident occurs at whatever level, it draws outrage, if you will, or at some level, people's interest. As time goes by and things settle down, it's fortunate that you don't have a major incident, but the complacency sets in. For a while there, an example we had with our community coalition when we first started this, we had at one point 50, 60, 70 people attending these meetings that we were holding about every other week. We've backed them down to about a month, and unfortunately we're down to really the usual players, school district representatives, some Boys and Girls Club and service providers in the city. The interest from the community wanes, and then when something will happen again, there'll be the outcry again, what are you doing, where are you at, why haven't you done something? But we really need to build from within, and we can step in as we've done quite effectively in the community, but we need the community to step up for itself. When we've had those homicides and other incidents, our Chief Massoni has come before the council and other groups to talk and say, somebody knows what happened out there. Somebody's got to step up and help us. Without your help, we're limited. So trying to build trust within the community is something that we're working hard at, and it's very difficult where we, the city or the schools, we're passing the baton into the community where they have somebody that they can go to, whether it's be the youth or the parents, for support, that guidance and that feeling of safety that they're not threatened. We understand that people don't feel a threat. They do feel a threat of retaliation, et cetera, but it's very important that we try to build that trust and get leaders within the community to take charge. And of course, funding. We've heard school liaison officers brought up here quite a bit. We in South San Francisco, in fact, cut back one of our officers during the deep economic crunch. On paper, it looked good, like, well, can't we just spread one officer over more schools? Sounds great from a dollar and cents, but we really did see the benefit of reinstituting that second liaison officer at the high school and middle school levels. So dollars for training, resources for within youth community, for programs, for at-risk youth, getting the right staffers, not just a recreation leader that's 15 or 16 years old to throw a basketball out there. You need some real professional help to reach the at-risk youth and be on their level to make a difference.
Thank you, Barry. Our final question: what practical next steps can we take within our own professional spheres of influence to identify and close gaps in the broad net of school and community safety? Chief?
Gee, we're so glad you asked that question, Sheriff. I happen to have a laundry list here, and again, as I said, it's because we've been thinking about this and talking about it, and really kudos to everyone who's put this together in the leadership of Congresswoman and others, because frankly, even just in asking these questions, we've already come up with several things that we are in the process of doing right now. A unified protocol. Our law enforcement has been meeting both with the County Board of Ed and several of our school leaders to say we are going to put one unified school response protocol. The simpler, I won't say it's stupid, but the simpler, the better, so that we all understand scaling up, scaling down. All of us are coming when there's any incident in our schools. And make no mistake, there are incidents in our schools. If we could just say for the last several years, the Hillsdale High School bombing, the recent threat at Aragon High School, where we had to make really tough decisions. Do we close schools because of terrorist threats by anonymous sources from, Amsterdam on a Facebook page? So, I mean, these things are out there and we're well on our way, but we have to get that unified and simple protocol that everyone understands and speaks the same language. Of course, time and resources for planning and practice thereof. The more you practice as you play, the more you will play as you've practiced to. So that's something that we really need to do. Those information sharing and early warning systems, I want to really focus on that. That has been an issue for us in this county. We went up to Salem, Oregon. They have an incredible team up there that is called a risk assessment team. It could be coupled right into our SMART team that we've already started in this county to look at connecting those dots and saying what are our future risks. Hillcrest and the youth juvenile campus up there on Tower Road, they have a risk assessment center. Did you know that we have one in this county? We stood it up almost 10 years ago, never fully funded it. And I get it. I so get the fact that we don't have the funding. But what that assessment center did was said everyone being booked into juvenile hall first goes through that door for a multidisciplinary assessment that will determine, is this kid a victim of bullying, of school or other violence, neglect, abuse? And maybe they don't need to be booked in. Maybe they need other resources. We started that school assessment center in 2002. Do you remember when we had to book an 8-year-old for writing a poem that included guns and bombs in school? We had no other place to assess the student's risk. That was part of what that assessment center should be for. I would submit that, like Salem, Oregon, and like some of the infrastructure we have in this county, we've got to put youth and adult risk together, and I think we have the infrastructure to do it. And then finally, I think regular and established communication. I will say that both bullying as one of our greatest risks for marginalizing or creating atmospheres of fear on our school campus are probably our most vicious vulnerability, and something that we're already working on, and we need to continue to redouble those efforts. And then finally, if I could say one other thing about school resource officers, and for all, we have almost all our chiefs in the county and our seconds in commands. This is not just a pitch for cash, but school resource officers, school safety advocates, school counselors, all of those adults must be plugged in. What we're doing in San Mateo is pretty cool. We're partnering a middle school and a high school shared school resource officer so they know the kids coming through. It's really lovely. And as my last pitch, Department of Justice, thank you, Congresswoman Speier, is putting together on the federal level another couple of rounds of school resource officer grants. So if you haven't gotten together with police and your local entities for education, I will say that it's just your early warning system, folks. And again, probation and the other school liaisons cannot be counted on enough. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Scott?
Thanks. Again, one of the scariest things for a superintendent or for a site principal is to hear that there's been an incident on a campus, that a student's been hurt or killed. It's what you stay awake at night trying to think about what you can do to try to make that so it doesn't happen. So for me, with as many incidents as we've had over the last 4 years, it's something that we consider to be critical, and I think what this is doing, this kind of activity that we're sharing today, is raising this to the level that it really needs to be at. We need to make this a priority because we're in this for education, but we're also in this for student safety. The second thing we need to do is we need to be able to collaborate. I have very good relationships with all the various different agencies, and I love the fact that we come to the table together as partners. That's one of the things I really believe is going to make this a strong and a workable product when we get through, and I'd just love to continue that good working relationship. We need to work on the language and the protocols. That's extremely important, and we've come up against problems when we haven't had that. We keep referencing Hillsdale. So there were SWAT teams from Palo Alto, there were response teams from South San Francisco surrounding the Hillsdale campus, and having this conversation with various different people that had various different protocols was challenging for us, and we've come a long ways since that point in time over the last 4 years. We need to look for funds to support the materials, the guidance counselors, the school resource officers. We have to figure out a way to do that. And I actually, again, this comes back down to, do we do it separately, district by district, school by school, police agency by police agency, or do we figure out some way to do it as a county and apply for a large grant so we can do some of the larger scalable things that hopefully we can do to help the students? And finally, I can't emphasize enough that we can do more on the prevention side, we can do more on the mental health side, we can do more on the bullying side, we can do more on the training of the staff to recognize the students that are at risk, and we have to figure out a way to do that consistently across the entire county with the same kind of protocols, language, and communication and fact sharing.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Barry?
Again, similar to the comments that have been made, of course, but educating the community and the schools through neighborhood watch programs, gang seminars for community and schools. I'm still amazed. I just find it very hard to believe, and this has been for a number of years, when we do gang workshops for parents, how many of them are, if they're telling the truth, they're truly oblivious when they see red and blue and what that means. And gee, I thought they were just a big 49er fan. And it's like, no, there's more to it than that. They're wearing it for red. But parents, some parents seem to be totally floored by that. And to me, it seems so commonplace now, but we have to keep pushing that message home because parents seem to still miss that fact in some cases. General safety presentations, PTA meetings. Our PTAs aren't as well attended as they should be in all schools. And it's very sad because you have to make those connections. So we have to keep pushing in those directions. As a city manager, as I mentioned before, it wasn't easy, but just on dollars and cents on paper, it seemed like the thing to do to cut a liaison officer. So it's my job, I think, to keep this message in the forefront, knowing the elected folks have many issues they have to grapple with. But those 4 officers that we've added to South San Francisco, it's imperative, in my opinion, that we keep them in place. And it would be easy at some point, if things continue to stay under the radar, that maybe at some point when budgets get tighter, that those officers, well, let's just put it to 3 officers now, and then maybe down to 2 officers. So balancing all the needs within a community, we have to keep in mind, it's my job to keep council informed so they can make informed decisions on the dollars and cents. And so what we have done is continue with biweekly reports from the chief of police on all the activity in the city and a separate biweekly report just for the neighborhood response team. So the council's aware what the impact is out there. So when it comes to tight dollars and cents, they can make informed decisions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for sharing your experiences and your expertise. We have a time for a couple of questions if anybody has any questions of our panel. Yes, sir.
Just more of a comment that we adults certainly need more mental health professionals, et cetera, but we also need to be able to empower. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. Again, I think our adult answers are certainly necessary and we need to be present, but I think we also need to very much empower the students to take charge of this process as well, or be part of the process.
Okay, thank you. Congresswoman, did you have a comment?
Can we explore the clean slate phenomenon a little bit more and give us some input as to why we shouldn't be just shredding records from middle school?
Sure.
Well, I'll start, and I think this is an excellent topic, and I hope mental health discusses this as they go along. I mean, there's certainly, and certainly our school administrators, but there's this idea that the child needs a clean slate when they go along. But if you look at our youth development model and our risk assessment model, so many of those indicators may present earlier on, and really it's protecting the student as much as it's protecting the community. We need to be able to identify those students who present and act out and disrupt, defy, whatever those issues are. If we look at them as warning signs and indicators of trouble and risk for the student, rather than a sort of an indictment against them or something that will just cause them to have a black mark as they enter the next school, perhaps we could even, I'm not looking to totally shelter that information, but perhaps it should just go to those folks who have an overarching larger picture. It doesn't need to go to every teacher to know they disrupted or defied in their middle school math class. But unless we start connecting the various dots, we won't know when these kids are in trouble to the point where they're either being victimized or suspect to a danger to themselves or others.
It's an interesting question. We've actually started to change our protocols over the last 4 years. We have this thing called Counselor Watch now, where we have 5 districts that feed, K-8 districts that feed into us. And when we first, about 4 years ago, we found that we had very little communication when the students were transferring up into the high schools. And that, in some ways, it's a trust issue. The parents are afraid of what stigma their kids are going to come to at the high school. But what we found is that not just in the mental health area, it was actually academic support. Is if we don't know what's going on with the students, how do we know how to support them, and it's too late 6-8 weeks into to the first quarter for us to start putting in interventions. And so we've actively, in the last few years, through shared data, through shared records, through meetings with our counselors, have actually torn down that barrier, I think, fairly strongly. We can always do more. That comes back down to time and resources and things like that. But the attitude about doing it, we've, in San Mateo Union High School District, and I believe in the other schools in the county, are really actively trying to overcome that and to build the trust with the incoming folks, so that that doesn't happen.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Ma'am in the middle there.
Also a comment about the sharing. So we actually have transition. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. We actually have transition meetings between, let's say, 8th grade and 9th grade, the counselors or the teachers, and then we let people who need to know. And so I think that that's the only way that we can really case manage, which is what I'm hearing you say, Chief, that we really need to have more case management between all of the people who are working with the student. And I think it's really important, both from mental health, schools, if the police are involved. And case management is critically important, and we do it through transition meetings at the school sites. Thank you.
The only problem, and I just say this very quickly, is we seem to get the people who need to know, rather than the understanding that everyone has a little part of the indicators of risk of a student. And so we need to get, and that's why I think this countywide assessment model works, because you can take it out of the individual environment and everyone can feel safe about giving it as a completer picture to those folks who have the sharing and can put the larger picture together. So it's great, but we've got to connect those dots.
Okay, well, please join me in thanking our distinguished panel for sharing their thoughts.
Good.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sheriff Munks, and our panel. Thank you very much. That was very informative.